Welcome to Fintech Chatted, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Follow us on your favorite podcast player or Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube.
Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the podcast where we cover all things fintech. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today I'm joined by Claire Alexander from Thinktechstartup. She's here to share her expertise on careers and job hunting. A little bit about Claire: she's the founder of Thinktechstartup, providing in-house on-demand talent and HR solutions to tech companies that are starting up and scaling up operations in Australia. Claire's also the founder of Coach Claire. After hiring over 1,000 people globally into tech organizations like Zip, where she was global head of talent, Claire now works with clients to accelerate their tech careers with a focus on finding and securing the right move into their next role. Claire, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dexter. Great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. It's been some time since we last had you on the show. I've invited you back on. You've now got your own consulting business to help people with their careers. And it's probably, I think, back then when you were on the show, I don't think anybody was really that interested, right? Because where it's a very different market now.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a lot of changes as far as I hear, Dexter. But look, Dexter, I've been on maternity leave for the last sort of 6 months or so. So, I'm really keen to pick your brains and find out about a bit more about the market and where the market's at currently. Because you are the guy with the finger on the pulse, he's in the know.
Yeah, look, if I kind of contrast, that time when we did have a chat, Claire, was, I think, the beginning of 2021. The height of what I would say was the kind of frothiness in fintech and tech globally, not just here in Oz. And at the time, if you cast your mind back as a head of talent and HR, you would have been finding it extremely difficult to find and secure the right talent. I'm sure you would have been dealing with a lot of issues around salaries and expectations and demands around working conditions and where to work and how people wanted to work. We've seen that kind of rescind a bit. And look, to put it into context, Claire, I'm getting increasingly calls and kind of emails from other recruiters in this space asking me to make introductions to my clients so that they can. So I think when tech recruiters and some tech recruiters I've known for 15 years, right, never ever had to make a sales call, are now having to make sales calls. That there's a big change in the market. Yep.
Wow. Gosh, not tech recruiters are the guys that they just sit back and place lots of roles, right?
So look, there is a change. There has been a shift, and quite a significant shift. And of course, as a recruiter, right, you're at the kind of forefront of the changes that are happening in the economy, and the things that you kind of expect to see another 6 to 12 months from now. So if I look at my business 12 months back, I could see that the shift in sentiment around investing and funding had changed. And a lot of the businesses that I was working with had gone from a mandate of growth at all costs to cut costs at all costs. And so what we've seen over this last 12 months is that directive now is starting to impact the job market. So much so that I'd say, I'm certainly seeing that there are people in tech positions, developers, engineers, who have been looking for 3 months. But if we kind of look at a tech business and a fintech business, tech, developers, engineers, they only make up, say, 40% of the workforce within an organization. And the other 60% is where I've seen the biggest impacts. So if you think, in your network, HR, talent, it's usually the first thing to go when you're starting to make job cuts. That's been heavily impacted. Marketing, sales, account management, customer success has been next, where we've seen big redundancies there as well.
Yeah. Well, why do you think the sales side of the business has, been let go? So you would think that you'd want to keep the sales staff on.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, Claire. And I think the reason being is that salespeople aren't magicians, right? You can't conjure business where it doesn't exist. And if all of your clients are saying we haven't got the money to spend, it doesn't matter how good a salesperson that person is, right? Sales is a performance-driven position, right? If you're an enterprise software business that has a sales cycle of 12, 18 months for a deal from beginning to end. And what I mean by that is that even your top performers, you've got to let go because you're just running out of cash runway, or there's no prospect of a market, or you've just lost your biggest client.
Right. Okay. And look, what's the market sentiment at the moment for people being asked to come back into the office? I know the last year or two it was all about working from home, and I'm hearing whispers that more and more people are going back into the city. Thursday nights are kicking off. Thursday, new Friday for after work drinks. So look, love to know what's being.
Yeah, this has been a topic that I've talked about with clients for probably the last 3 years, Claire. And I think it absolutely is now. I think a push to get people back in the office. I think everybody's settled on a hybrid model, right? Like the kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some businesses have got fixed days where everybody has to be there together. But I think the reality is that for most businesses, their expectation is that people come into the office for at least a couple of days per week.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, with businesses that are still in business, what are they saying about salaries and benefits now? Are they still as competitive as they were? I mean, what I really hate hearing in the market is people saying, "Look, I've got to take a pay cut. I'm going to try and find another job, but I'm really flexible on salary and things now because of the market." And is that the case that people do need to go for lower salaries now if they're going to change roles?
Unfortunately, I think in some instances it is, right. And look, the kind of there's two things that tend to happen in these cycles. Is that once you kind of raise salaries, it's very difficult to kind of then reduce them. So what you do find is that perhaps whilst the salary bands might not drop, if you're hiring, you're probably going to get a lot more experience for the same money than you were, say, a year and a half ago. On the flip side, if you're in a role where there's been a lot of redundancies and there's a lot of people on the market and there's not much demand, look, it's like any other free market, right? Supply and demand determines what the pricing of that market. So there are instances, particularly I think for more senior people, where you have to have then a realization that actually maybe I am going to have to take a pay cut. In most instances, though, I think people would probably kind of keep parity from where they were, to with to a large degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so who is hiring at the moment? I'd love to know who's going through that growth phase currently.
I don't think there's anybody that's really going through a growth phase. There's a few businesses that have won funding that have gone and hired, but if you look at the funding levels, most of it, I mean, they're back down to where they were at the beginning of 2018, right?
Yeah, right.
2018 was when I first thought, hey, there could be an industry here, and there could be a business opportunity for me. So that's a major concern. Of the businesses that have got funding, the vast majority have been pre-seed, small rounds of $5-6 million, which you can't really do a whole heap of hiring with with that amount of money. And so, if you look, there's been, I think, maybe three rounds that have been above 20 million this year so far. So there's not, I think what we're seeing is, kind of a long drawn period of what I'd say would be consolidation. Now that we've set the kind of the landscape of what the next 12 months is going to be about, I wanted to kind of shift the conversation to what people can do about it. And look, I'm kind of a big advocate for people using career coaches, not recruiters, right? Like a recruiter's not a career coach. To using a career coach, just like you would if you were looking to get in shape, in physical shape, and you would go and see a personal trainer. But look, I wanted to kind of get it just a bit of an understanding from you as to, I guess, first of all, like how do you work and what types of people do you work with?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. The easiest way to sort of explain what I do is that I get people job ready. So as we know, recruitment agencies present you opportunities, and a career coach actually supports you on that journey to help you to secure a role. So that could include everything from resume reviews to LinkedIn optimization, interview preparation. But because I've also got that HR background, I'll also support people with performance related issues, how to get that promotion, and even sort of any workplace sort of issues that it might be facing with challenging bosses, etc. So look, generally, because I've been in the tech industry for a number of years now, and I've worked in your smaller startup through to your, a couple of unicorn businesses, my sweet spot is people, I'd say senior professionals to executive in the tech space. I've done a huge amount in fintech payments, and that's sort of been my bread and butter. But those are the people that I generally tend to see come to me. And also what I find actually quite a lot is I get quite a lot of people, Dexter, when you get to that age, when you're 30 like us, right? And you think, what do I want to do now? I feel stuck. I want to change my career. Actually, I wouldn't mind going into tech. There's a lot of people now who think, I don't have any tech experience, and how do I get into the tech world? I get a lot of people coming to me in that respect too.
Yeah, you said you go to a recruitment agency and they present these opportunities. I think it's worth saying that a lot of these opportunities that are being presented, either one, might not exist. Two, they might have just seen it on an ad and thought, right, I'm going to kind of, throw this person's resume across and see if I can get the job on. Right. The third is they're kind of competing against an internal talent agency where they've probably already got your resume. And it causes, I'm sure that you've had lots of shit fights with recruiters on here, hasn't you? Right. So look, I'm not trying to kind of ruin my own business here, but there's a reason why I started my own business. And it was because I couldn't stand being involved in that shit and that kind of behavior. And for me, it just wasn't a way to operate a business. So from the kind of perspective of somebody who, let's say you've just been made redundant and let go, usually the first thing that I see people do is they go and register with recruiters and they spend about 3 months refining a resume that like kind of people are going to make their mind up on the first page in the first few seconds, whether they're going to call you or not. What would be your advice to somebody who, if they've just been made redundant, what should be the first things that they should do rather than what everybody does, which is go and call a recruiter and, crap around with your resume?
Yeah, look, LinkedIn is where you need to be. Just live and breathe LinkedIn. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. And what I mean by that is that, you need to make sure that you're going to be searchable for whatever job it is that you want. So I don't know, if you want to be a product manager, make sure that throughout your LinkedIn profile, it's very clear that you're a product manager and in what space you're playing. So whether it's fintech, prop tech, whatever. And it makes it much easier for recruiters then to approach you with those opportunities. And not only that, hiring managers and internal talent teams. One thing that I also suggest to people, and you'll know about this as well, Dexter, from LinkedIn Recruiter, but what I would suggest is any job that you want and any company that you want to work for, you need to follow those companies on LinkedIn and make sure you're engaging with their pages. Because what happens is when recruiters, internal recruiters and hiring managers are looking for candidates, what comes up? It comes up with who's engaging with your brand. Now, if you've, I don't know, 500,000 people open to work, but you've got 10 people that are engaged with your brand, who are you going to go to first? And, if they're looking for a product manager, you're a product manager, you're going to be that go-to person. So I definitely spend a bit of time doing that. And then look, network is so important on LinkedIn and building your brand, online presence. Make sure you're getting out there, posting, reach out, or do a bit of research on the companies that you want to work for and reach out to hiring managers and start up a conversation. But when you're starting up conversation, don't be like, oh, can we meet for a coffee? I'm really keen to, hear about what you do. Actually think, and look, Dexter, I think you've sort of talked about this as well previously on some of your posts, but think about a problem that you might be able to solve for them, but also always think about what value do you create? So how do you make this hiring manager's life easier? And, this is what I say to all of my clients, especially when they're doing their resumes, is don't just put down your responsibilities. No one really wants to, hopefully, a head of product knows what a product manager does. So you want to be making sure that you're saying, okay, this is how I make life easier for you. And this is the problem I'm going to solve.
I've always felt that, look, kind of certainly in my position and the work that I do and my clients' expectations, they're not looking for somebody who's out of a job and wants a job. They're looking for the right person. And I often think that if you're out of a job, there's kind of the immediate thing or reaction that somebody will ask if they're the interviewer is why. And it's never a good reason, right? It's always like, oh, there must be something wrong here. Why were they let go? We wouldn't let our best people go. Why is this person, not in work? Why has nobody hired them? You don't get somebody going, yippee, this person's available. Great, let's get them in. What are your thoughts around, first of all, that if you are looking, whether that's actually going to be beneficial or could it actually be detrimental to your job search?
I've got to be careful what I say here, actually, because I've seen a lot of sort of controversy in this area. Look, I think you hit the nail on the head. However, with the open to work badges, again, what you've got to remember is that there's a lot of people or candidates need to remember that this green badge actually doesn't really make that much of a difference, because when somebody is searching, so whether it's through Recruiter Lite packages or LinkedIn Recruiter, or even just generally, you don't actually search per green. You actually search there's an open to work button in which you can obviously click on. So you can actually, in the back end, state that you're open to work without having that badge on it anyway. Look, that would be my preference.
I've got a kind of joke with one of my network where when we first met, I kind of said, look, when I meet with candidates, there's a lot of them who think like it's Jerry Maguire, right? And they're Cuba Gooding Jr. and I'm Tom Cruise, and I got to show me the money, and I'm what's my agent going to do for me? And I say, look, I'm not working for you. I'm working for my client, right? I'm not here to kind of represent you. I'm here to represent my client, and yes, I want to kind of make sure that the negotiation goes well and we get the right person. I don't think recruiters do that very well, right? They kind of play this game where they're kind of almost playing both sides off each other, which is why I'm such a big advocate for using a career coach, because that is then when you're actually engaging somebody to work on your behalf, right? And they are solely focused on what your best needs are and to help you. Whereas I'm kind of focused on, first of all, my client's best needs, right? But I know that I've got to get what's right for the candidate as well to make sure that the outcome's the right outcome. What would you say, kind of from the perspective of engaging a career coach, is the kind of key differences that you're going to get than, say, going and meeting a recruiter who's going to promise to punt your resume around to their clients?
Look, a recruiter, if you get a really nice one, they might give you some tips around, improving your resume, and they might help you with mock interviews, do preparation, and support you in that sense. And what they're not going to be able to help you with, though, is they're not going to be able to guarantee you that job. That's for you to get ready for. And also, they're probably not going to be able to support you with the salary negotiation side of things, because they're given a bracket and they are tasked with placing a person within that particular range. So they're not going to be able to give you that black and white advice. They're not going to say, okay, well, you should push maybe for another 20 grand, or don't do that, or drop down, or something like that. I think that's what's probably more difficult, salary negotiation side. They're not going to be able to probably help you sort of determine, well, your standard recruiter isn't going to be able to help you determine, what you should do next in your career. And they're also not going to be able to help you with that employee life cycle stuff. Whereas a career coach can do that.
Yeah. Now, here's the kind of flip side to what you just said. A recruiter is not incentivized for a candidate to discover all of those things. A recruiter is incentivized for a person to accept a job and start that job, regardless of whether they're the right person for the job and whether the job's right for them or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree.
So I wanted to also have a chat with you about, I guess, the best way to approach companies, right? So, one of the other issues that I've got, and having recruited in downturns, right? When there are fewer jobs, there's less demand, which means there's less need to use recruitment companies, which means there's fewer jobs, but there's still the same amount of recruitment companies that there was when you had a huge talent short market. And so what you have are kind of a small number of jobs where you maybe have 5 recruitment agencies all working on it, an internal recruitment team. And I've seen, I've been involved in it, right? Where you just have these shit shows and fights over who's the candidate. My view is, in this market, you should just bypass recruitment agencies altogether and become essentially your own recruiter and go and approach the type, as you said before, the types of companies that you wanted to, work for, and approach them direct. Now, you've kind of given some ideas around, like a value proposition, and maybe he's approaching them around problem solving. But how do you find out who are the right people to approach in a business? And what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, look, again, LinkedIn is your friend. So you need to do a bit of research first, Dexter. So look, again, I'll use sort of the product example. So you need to do research on who your head of product is and who this role would report into. So it could be even a product lead. And then I'd reach out to them directly. Now, I would say reach out to them directly if there isn't a role advertised, because if the role is advertised, and you'll know this, Dexter, internal recruiters really get the shits if you bypass them. They really don't like it. And look, I've been an internal recruiter, so I can say this. Look, part of it is because more often than not, the process isn't then managed well as it should be, and the candidate experience really just sort of goes to shit. And the recruiter needs to be able to manage that whole process rather than the hiring manager having separate conversations about salary and etc. So if there's a job advertised, I would say apply direct, although applying for jobs, as you know, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But if you want to apply for jobs, do it via LinkedIn to the internal recruiter. Drop the internal recruiter a message just to say, hey, just letting you know that I have sent you a message. That I have applied for a job. And then you could be a little bit cheeky and send a message to the hiring manager saying, hi, I've applied via the correct channels, and I just wanted to give you the heads up that I've applied. Because if you've got a hiring manager that's really got their finger on the pulse, they're going to quickly have a look at your profile, because a lot of hiring managers can't help themselves. Even if they've got an internal recruitment team, they'll be thinking, oh, I want to sort of get involved in the recruitment, and quite rightly so. And they're going to look at your profile. So that's another reason to make sure why your profile is optimized or singing and dancing. And then they're going to either respond to you and then probably flick the internal recruiter message and say, hey, this person's applied and they're awesome. So that's what I would do if there's a job advertised. But if the job isn't advertised, then just go to the hiring manager directly. And that shouldn't be an issue, because the hiring manager might already be thinking about a job that's coming up in 6 months' time. Might not be the right job right now. There might not be a job right now, but at least they can start having some informal chats with you, and then they can get the internal recruitment team involved. And look, Dexter, I suppose what we've got to remember as well is that currently there's a lot of businesses, even larger businesses, that don't even have internal recruitment teams currently, because they've all been axed, or you've got a standalone HR person. Sorry, HR people. Again, I've done HR, but generally they don't like doing recruitment.
Yeah. No, they don't.
So, it can be really, really difficult for them. So there's really no harm in sort of, reaching out to the hiring manager and giving them a little bit of a helping hand. And in circumstances, I think they're probably okay with it.
Now, that leads kind of beautifully to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is ghosting, right?
Oh, yeah.
And look, I think there's kind of a few things that are going on here. And look, the reality is, I think if you're in the job market, it's something that, one, you're going to have to accept, but two, you're going to have to kind of get set emotionally and psychologically as to how to deal with that, because it's just inevitable that's going to happen. The reasons, look, I think, we all get ghosted. I get ghosted in my business all the time, right? And I think that the way in which I learned to deal with it was to recognize that actually what's happening has got nothing to do with you. There's 99 other things that's going on in this person's world that are more important to them right now. And whilst, hey, look, might be a priority to me, it's not a priority to them.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, Dexter, I think you answered that question sort of for me, in that you're absolutely right. You've got hundreds, maybe thousands of candidates in some instances, right, where you've got a recruiter who's got 20 jobs. So there's thousands of applicants. They're running around like a headless chicken. And, it isn't personal, because they literally cannot get to everybody.
I put a post up last week saying only 2 letters make the difference between hustling and hassling. How do you kind of make sure that you're not hassling somebody, but you're still following up?
Oh, yeah. So look, and funnily enough, I actually had a coaching client ask me that same question this week, and they'd had an interview, and they'd said to me, look, they told me they were going to give me feedback this week. Is it okay if I send them a message saying just following up with feedback? Look, I would say don't do that. Don't do that until after the event, because you've always got to think in your mind, am I making the life easier for a recruiter by this message? Okay. If it's going to be just another text message, just another email in their inbox, it's not making it easier for them, right? They've already know that they've got to get back to you with interview feedback. So by you sending 1, 2 messages, that's not going to be ideal, and it might irritate them, and you want the recruiter to be almost like your best mate. Okay, or you at least want to be on the good side of them. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong though at the same time as doing that. But I think there are people that will be sending a message every few days, just not helpful, because at the end of the day, if they haven't got back to you, there's a reason. I don't know, maybe they've been on sick leave because they've had COVID for a week and they're not even in the office, or the hiring manager is. There's just so many reasons. So I think if you're hustling, you're being strategic in probably the questions that you're asking. So I don't know, if the hiring manager said that they wanted to circle back to you on a particular thing in the next interview, you might want to do some due diligence and do a bit of work and send, I don't know, like a bit of a deck or something to the hiring manager to say, I've thought about, this problem that you talked about, that we talk about, and readiness for the second interview, I just wanted to send this to you. I think that's very different to say, look, have I got any feedback? When's going to be the next interview?
What I want to talk to you next is about negotiating salary, right? But so with that in mind, kind of when you're reaching that stage, what would you say is the kind of best way to navigate that? Do you go and kind of hustle or push? Do you send an email saying, hey, I'm interested? What would you suggest once you've had that final interview, what would you say would be the best way to kind of try and push it to the next stage?
Oh, look, I think if you've had that final interview, I think, whether you're interested in that role or not, I think it's always a great thing to do. But send an email sometime later on that day, or maybe the next day, to say, look, I've really enjoyed meeting with you and your time, and whatever actually happens as a result of this process, this has been a great experience, or, you could pull something out from the interview that you want to touch on, or that was of interest. So I would say that is the best way to handle that. And then following that, unfortunately, it's just going to be a wait and see. I probably wouldn't call or email for a few days after that final interview to see if there's going to be an offer forthcoming, because quite often, just because you don't hear straight away doesn't mean bad news. Again, it may well be that they're trying to sort of work out of these two top candidates which is the one that they want, and they've got to have several people in a room to talk it out, and that sometimes can take a week. So it's not necessarily bad news. So again, you don't want to be that person that's saying, hey, I'm going to get an offer, because you want to show that you're in demand. So if you're chasing them, then, that they know that you're sort of a candidate that's in the bag, and you want to be that candidate that's, in demand.
So how do you, because this is usually where I find that things will stall, right? And everybody wants it to be a fast process. But in my experience, fast processes are actually probably the most risky ones, because people don't get the time to do their DD, don't get the time to just kind of let the initial excitement kind of fade, and then start ask questions and go, oh, actually, what about this or what about that? So usually if it goes too quickly, it's got more chance of failure than something that takes forever to execute.
Yeah, I always say to my clients, look, if you can wait at least a day, do that. Don't do it. Don't make the offer on the very same day. You're playing your cards out on the table, and you become a bit desperate. And you know what? It can actually freak out candidates. They're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, this has moved too fast. And a lot of people need time to digest. And look, there's lots of different cultures as well in Australia, and certain cultures do actually, I find, digest more than others, and they might even need a couple, 2-3 days.
If you're not the candidate, and let's say you're rejected, what have you found been the best ways to respond to that, Claire?
Look, I've always picked up the phone. I think somebody has invested their time in meeting with you, and is potentially emotionally invested as well. And I think it's great to be able to give very constructive feedback.
And being on the receiving end of that, like, what are some of the things that you've seen candidates do where it's kind of left a bad experience, and it's maybe hindered their chances? Because let's face it, right? Like we've both had instances where your preferred candidate accepts the offer, then dicks you around, and then you go back to the second candidate, and they might have been rejected.
Yeah, look, I think you just have to
smile and wave, smile and wave.
Smile and wave, and just thank them for their time. And look, I have had candidates that have cracked the shits. I've just said, this has been a waste of my time. I'm not happy. You know, and have actually sent me relatively abusive, I wouldn't say abusive, but unkind emails. And look, you know, what's going to happen when there's another role? Say, I don't know, again, product manager. Say you want to hire another product manager and you were a close number 2 in a month's time. You're not going to be the person that they contact, because you'll be like, you quite often will think, God, thank God, like that didn't go for them.
I think what's really important for people to remember, you know, is I say to everybody, you know, and particularly my clients, what you're seeing in an interview, right, isn't what I get to see. I get to see the real person. You get to see somebody putting on a rehearsal and doing doing it like a screenshot for a movie, right? A starring role in a movie. I get to see what they're like without the makeup, and they haven't prepared the lines. And I think oftentimes, you know, that's a really good example. You know, it's like you'll ask a question in an interview, how do you deal with setbacks? And they'll give you a great scripted answer, but you just had an experience where that person's had a setback and you've seen how they've dealt with it. And it's very, very different to what they would tell you in the interview, right? About how they would deal with a setback. And I think this is what candidates, you know, kind of need to recognize, is that your behavior is being assessed all the way through the process, not just in the interviews, but every interaction that you have with anybody who's involved in it, whether it's a recruiter, a hiring manager, person taking your references, all of that's, you know, every single interaction counts.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And look, I think there have been instances where, you know, somebody has been very well behaved, and then maybe they've been sort of rude to the receptionist, or, you know, and it completely just screws things for them. So look, you know, just better to be well behaved, but you've got to be your authentic self as well.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Now we're going to talk about, I think, what everybody, and this could be like a whole series of podcasts, which is negotiating salary. First of all, look, as a career coach, what would you say? Well, no, let's talk first of all as a recruiter, right? Being on that side, HR and talent. What are the red flags that you see when somebody goes to negotiate a salary?
A huge red flag is that they suddenly increase their salary by, say, I don't know, 30, 40K. And that actually does happen. So they start changing the goalposts. Maybe they told you what their salary expectations were at the beginning of the process, and then they suddenly start talking about more cash, more benefits. Or maybe you're going to offer them and they say, oh, and I've had this before as well. I've actually got a 6-week holiday booked, and I'm going in 3 to 4 weeks. So those are those kind of, you know, difficult things with negotiations that is a red flag for me.
There's so much conflicting advice out there as to how you should position yourself when it comes to salary, right?
Yeah.
I get it where I ask people and say, I'm not even asking for a number. It's just, look, you know, what's the kind of ballpark, you know, we're playing in, right? Give me a range. And oh no, what are they paying? It's like, look, it's not that simple, right? There isn't a number.
Yeah.
There's like this kind of, they've got to, you know, they're looking at a whole different bunch of options and they're going to pick which one's right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, you know, just because their range is 300 to 500K that they're going to pay you 500K.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. Well, firstly, from the candidate's perspective, I think again, it's you need to know your value firstly and your worth, and you need to have at the back of your mind what's your bottom line, and what are you going to be the most comfortable with if you do have to drop for whatever reason.
I want to just say something, right? To determine your value, do not go and ask your friends, because they add 20% onto whatever they're earning and they're bullshitting you.
They work at Atlassian and they're 100K more than other tech businesses. Yeah. So although you need to know your worth, you also need to know what the market's saying, what's actually market rate, and think about, is this a like for like for where I'm at now? And what I mean by that is, if you're at, say, a big bank, chances are that you're going to be paid a huge amount more than if you go into a 2-3 person startup. So you've got to be sensible also when you're thinking about salary, because there could be huge differences there.
How do you go about managing that risk?
Look, I think that's ultimately going to depend on what you're looking for as an individual, right? So, and what your appetite for risk is. So it may well be that you're somebody that sees you measure success by, exposure, or you've taken on a bigger role because you're in a startup, so you're sort of doing everything.
Yeah.
So I think you'd have to think of it like that.
What do you find then, Claire? Kind of, because I'm sure when you were recruiting, and I get the same thing, right? Like, if you ask somebody, what are you looking for? Everybody, it's the same answer. I want to make a difference, right? And then I go, okay, what are you looking for? Salary. And I say, oh, money's not important, right? I go, okay, well, I'm not going to take you for your word on that. And the reason why is that whenever I negotiate salary, I spend about 10 hours doing it, right? So clearly it is important, right? What's like, when you're working with clients, how much of it is about salary and reward, and how much is it about actually going deep into that, making a difference?
Yeah, look, I think it's not an easy task, right?
It's not. That's why you need a coach, right? It's like,
yeah, and look, what you don't realize is, some of the things that you think that you really want to do is potentially because, I don't know, your parents said something, or, society or the people around you sort of point of view. So I think the questions that I then tend to ask are things like, what are you great at? Or what do you love doing that everyone hates doing in your workplace? Or what do people come to you for? And generally speaking, those answers, I find, you can draw out, what it is that potentially somebody is interested in. Look, I also do a lot of NLP as well with my coaching clients as well. And you ask questions so quickly that the answer that they give within that second is actually really at the crux of what they want, rather than them sort of thinking through. Because otherwise you tend to, be giving an answer of what you think you should be saying, as opposed to what you really want.
The only time they feel that they should be doing this type of work that you as a career coach would do with them is when they've lost a job, or they're not in work and they need to find another role, when really it should be something that they're doing as a daily, just like we do exercise, go to the gym, right? If you want to keep fit and maintain your health and fitness, you got to go to the gym every day, or every few days, and go and exercise. What do you find is kind of the benefit above just the job search of help and helping somebody find that next thing that a career coach gives somebody?
I think sometimes you want to speak to somebody that might not be your direct colleagues, or you might not want to speak to your boss about, what you need to do in order to get, say, that next pay rise. So, you can sort of break it down and with them and talk to them about how they get to where they need to be. It may well be, if there's any sort of performance related issues. And look, times are tough. Especially when you've got potentially family stresses, you've got world crises, right? And, sometimes performance can be impacted. So, you can speak to somebody, you can speak to a coach about performance related issues and how you can turn things around and make a difference. Look, it could be about that what's going to be the next career move for you. So instead of waiting for to be made redundant, or waiting for the time that you actually hate your job and it's just too late because you've got to get it out now. What is going to be your career trajectory? What does that look like over the space of the next few years? Where do you want to be in 10 years' time? And I think that's probably what you can't do with, either your recruiters, as you talked about, or it may be more difficult to talk to your boss about. I would say that for anyone who wants a career coach, it's really important to get somebody, though, that's, been in. So if you want to go for a job search, that's actually done recruitment, that's actually been in the industry that you want to move into, rather than just somebody who might have been writing resumes for sort of years. I think that's important. And also look, I've actually had people reach out to me more recently that have been in logistics. Now, I've been very honest with them and I've said, look, I don't have experience in this space. So it's really important for people to actually approach career coaches that have got that expertise in that particular area so they can really support you on your career journey.
Yeah, look, I think context is everything, right? And, I think that's the difference between insights and advice. I think advice is like everybody gives advice, right? And it's like, unless it's from somebody who's credible, I think it does more harm than it often does good.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you've sort of said, haven't you? Look, don't ask for your friends and, everybody has an opinion, right? But you actually need to speak to people who are really in the know.
Well, Claire, it's been fantastic to chat. Where can people find out more about your career coaching services? And also, if we've got, founders out there who have made cuts, within talent and HR, and they're looking for some support that they can bring in on a, kind of ad hoc basis rather than a permanent resource, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, look, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So for both my businesses, Thinktechstartup and Coach Claire. And for Coach Claire, I do have a website, www.coachclaire.co. And you can also drop me an email to claire@coachclaire.co for any coaching inquiries.
Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, you can connect with me, Dexter Cousins, on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're looking to hire tier 1 people, you can reach out to me on those platforms or check out tier1people.com/contact. Alternatively, if you are on the market looking for a job, make sure to follow me on LinkedIn, where each day I'll be posting job hunting tips, and you'll also see us mention any opportunities that we're working on. Until the next episode, keep safe. Fintech Chatter is produced by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll find world-class leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.